I'm excited to celebrate your new book, Don't Say This, I'm particularly passionate about this because I love the voice. I love the art and science of communication. But man, if I don't use a lot of pause words. So yeah, help set me on the right path, my friend. And in so doing, my wonderful audience, my listeners, my viewers, yeah, how can we all communicate better and more effectively in our professional lives and our personal lives?
Yeah.
Let's start there.
Yeah, for sure. First of all, I love that you're a student of this and you're excited about this because it's not like an incidental thing. You're focused on health, you're focused on wellness, optimizing your life. People completely overlook that we do this activity up to 10,000 times a day. So this is not just public speaking, I have a big pitch coming up or something. No, it's every time you're turning air into sound and then sound into words. We do it all the time. So it stands to reason that just like an athlete, if you could get a little bit better at that given technique, it could make your life better, which is to the subtitle of the book, How to Communicate Effectively to Live a Better Life. Now, you asked about filler. The title of the book, in a sense, is a trick. And as soon as a reader opens the very first page, I tell them that. So I called the book Don't Say because that's what we hear all the time, right? Like, don't make distracting hand gestures. Don't talk too fast. Don't say Don't say like. Don't say kind of. But all that does is activate thought suppression. It's like for a basketball player, don't hit the front of the rim, right? And that's all you're thinking about is doing that thing. So the question becomes, all right, we know we don't want to do these things, these pause words, these behaviors, but if fixating on the don't doesn't work, what does? Well, you'll like this because of all your focus on health and wellness and the body and kinesthetics. The book is just jam-packed full of exercises to use your body to change behavior. So in the book, I actually teach people, hilariously, I did this on Good Morning America yesterday where I had someone walk on a balance beam. So it's even better if you have a big balance beam to walk on, but you can use your fingers. You simply walk your fingers across a table or desk. Top of your leg would also work. And as you're seeing me do now, the act of moving your fingers coincides with you choosing your words. Once you've completed a thought, bring your hand back to the front of the desk and walk again. Now, if you feel yourself say an or a like or a kinda or a sorta, it's not a problem up here in your brain. It's not even a problem here with your mouth. It's a problem with your fingers. You were not specific enough with how you placed your fingers. Because the in a sense, they're a symptom. They're a byproduct. We open our mouth, we just start talking, just words fly out, and it's like, kind of like, sort of, kind of this, that, the other. The antidote is to truly choose your words. And this exercise helps you actually focus on what you're trying to say rather than all the filler and the clutter that you're trying to avoid.
Okay. So how is this exercise then best used? I mean, like on a daily basis before practicing for a presentation or a speech or a difficult conversation?
Yeah. Think of this just like an athlete, okay? There's certain drills you do in practice. They're to build muscle memory. You do them enough, they stick around in the game. So you would never play, you tell me what's a sport we should use as an example.
Well, we were talking about boxing before we got rolling. So yeah, let's use that.
Okay, great. So let's say some coach might put a TheraBand around one of your arms to make a punching action more difficult. And you do this in practice or, in your lessons or your sessions to strengthen a certain muscle. But then when you go to the actual boxing match or the fight, you would take the TheraBand off, but that muscle memory would stick around. So this exercise is the same. You practice this 2 minutes, 5 minutes a day to increase what I call linguistic precision, meaning are you precise with your words or not? And then as you do this, you begin to build muscle memory. Now, remote communication gives us a cheat because we have this like digital, I call it a digital cloak of invisibility. People can't see what your hands are doing below the frame of the camera. So I actually have clients who will walk their fingers in high-stakes situations under the boundary of the camera, forcing themselves to speak more slowly or choose their words more specifically.
Very interesting. So it helps you to be more, what's the phrase that you used? Verbally?
Linguistic precision.
Wow.
Yeah.
Is that related to verbal fluidity? That's a concept that when I first heard that term, I really liked it. And for me, I associate that term with people who I think are really brilliant speakers. For example, Jordan Peterson, I think he's one of the greatest living speakers. I think Russell Brand is one of the greatest living speakers.
Yeah.
There you go with my pause words,
But let me interject. I'm not the police, and I say that in the chapter on linguistic precision. I don't care if you say a couple times. I don't care if you say like, and your audience doesn't either. We don't. What I do care about a lot, though, is if when you and I are having a nice, natural conversation and you're really interested in what we're talking about, and you say every 20 seconds, 30 seconds, who cares? But let's say you're going to go pitch some new thing to some audience, and all of a sudden the ums skyrocket to like every 3 seconds. That discrepancy between your native default amount of filler, and then all of a sudden when you're in that situation, you become much more self-focused and much more self-conscious. That's the gap that I am interested in, because in those moments, what it reveals is that you're no longer thinking about your audience or your subject matter. You're thinking about myself and what I'm saying and trying to make sure that I say the smartest stuff all the time. Rate of speech picks up, breath stops, all of your kind of athletics of communication disappears, and all of these ums go up by 3, 5, 10x.
Well, you call them a symptom.
Yeah.
Right? So is that would you say it's a symptom of anxiety?
Sure. It's a symptom of a bunch of things in which we become self-focused. So communication is really the act of being other-focused. The test of communication is not, did I look good or sound good or seem like I had strong presence? The test is, did I reach the other person? Are they persuaded? Are they motivated? Whatever you're trying to achieve in that moment. When we're other-focused, we do all these behaviors naturally. We choose our words. We use inflection and vocal variety. We actually maintain eye contact because we want to see, is the person digesting what I'm saying or not? But when we become self-focused, that tends to fall apart. And filler is one of these symptoms of being more self-focused.
Yeah. I'm going to criticize myself. My seemingly favorite filler word, which people will point out, like in my appearances on, for example, like I've been on the Joe Rogan Experience, and it's not a frequent criticism that I get, but certainly some people have noticed that I say a lot. And I recognize that I do. I'll start sentences with So how do I'm okay saying it occasionally. I think it's a normal part of human dialect.
Yeah.
Colloquial, casual conversation.
Sure.
But I think sometimes maybe I say it too much.
Yeah.
What can I do to cut down on my use of
It's the same thing. So first, let's go back to the exercise with the finger walking, and then I'll teach you a second exercise. Both of these are in the book, by the way. They're actually the first two exercises I teach, chapter 6 and chapter 7. And then remind me, because we should come back to verbal fluidity too, because that's an interesting term. But the is the same thing as the like or the kinda or the sorta. In fact, in the chapter on filler words, I give people 2 criteria to think about, is it filler or not? And here's the 2 criteria. 1, it's not grammatically necessary. So in this case, definitely fits that bill. And number 2, you're not actually aware that you're even using it until someone points it out to you, or you watch footage and you see that. I even had a client one time who used the word, I'm not joking, used the word viscerally as filler. Like every second sentence viscerally came into the sentence. Yeah, I know, completely.
That might have been a tick.
Well, it made no sense at all, but he was striving to sound erudite and incredibly intelligent, and I'm putting on a faux British accent, by the way.
It's pretty good, actually.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. He was using this all the time, and so that by itself could be thought of as filler. So the essentially, you may in fact be wanting the audience to corroborate what you're saying. It may be some drive to get affirmation of, do you know what I mean? Do you agree? Right? Question mark, these sorts of things. And the begins to be a manifestation of that. So again, it's not a sin. Okay, you say some but you're right. If it becomes overwhelming, it actually gets in the way of people understanding what you're saying, as an example, or even kind of diminishing your presence in a situation, then it's worth looking at.
Yeah, as a writer, it drives me crazy when I say things that don't make grammatical sense. I'll even back up and try to say the thing again that I was trying to say if I make a linguistic gaffe. But is an interesting. It's an interesting example because sometimes it actually, I feel like it does make grammatical sense. It's like you're trying to relate the idea.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
To the person you're speaking to.
Yeah. Well, I coach people on this with a different word. So you'll hear people who will inject the word right into the end of countless sentences.
Oh, I do
They'll
that
be
too.
talking and say, right? This is great coffee, right? You want to have a podcast together, right? And we can kind of, right, talk about how, right, everything's going to be fixed, right? You get my point. I'm overdoing it, of course. What I will tell people is I say, you're allowed to say those rights, but only if you actually mean it. And if you're actually looking for consent or agreement or corroboration. If it becomes a tick in which you're just assuming the person is agreeing with you, then you're actually doing the opposite of communication. You're not in any kind of communion. You're not getting their agreement or assent. You're just streaming through something, forcing corroboration words down their throat, and they may not actually agree with you, right?
Makes perfect sense. What about words that people or phrases that people commonly screw up? Like one of my favorites that I hear people do is like nails on a chalkboard to me, but irregardless.
Yeah.
Which is not a word.
No. No. There's a bunch. And then even phrases, you'll hear people say, not for nothing. And then soon not for nothing is in every single sentence. And soon you're thinking like, what does not for nothing even mean? But yeah, you're right. We pick up this sort of clutter in our language, and it can even become contagious too, where culturally a small group of people will all begin saying sort ofs or kind ofs or you knows or irregardless. And the test is always, again, is it a problem? Is it a capital P problem? No, probably not. But is it an indication that you're not actually being as mindful about the stuff that's coming out of your mouth as you could be? And therefore, not just mindful because mindfulness is important, but in a deeper level, are you really being of service to the other person? Are you really thinking about what they need to hear, what would help them in their life? And probably all those extraneous words that are just cluttering up your language, they're probably not helping them.
Let's go back to verbal fluency.
Yeah.
When
you said verbal fluidity, I thought.
Fluidity, yes.
Yeah.
Fluency, fluidity, verbal fluidity. Maybe I meant fluency.
Let's go with fluidity. Why not? Let's make up some language on here.
I like it, yeah.
Yeah.
Why not? It's my show.
Yes.
When you hear somebody like Jordan Peterson speak, Russell Brand, like what goes through your mind when you hear them?
Sure.
They're seemingly masters of linguistics.
Yeah.
Like linguistic ninjas.
Sure. So the two things are related. Now, I'm going to make a jump here, okay? You have not given me your definition of what verbal fluidity is. I'm just going to make a jump and tell you what I think it means, okay? And then we can tinker with the definition together. But verbal fluidity means to me that you are astonishingly good at doing this incredible decision tree flow that is choosing a language in the moment. At any given moment, your brain is sifting through, call it 10,000, 20,000 words, 30,000 if you have a massive vocabulary. And in the moment, better than even large language models can do, choosing these incredibly specific words to paint a vivid picture, to motivate an audience. That would be verbal fluidity, very fluid with that. It's related to linguistic precision. Linguistic precision is being dedicated enough to take whatever time you need to find that given word. So I will often tell people, you don't need a big vocabulary to be articulate. I'll give you an example. This is the best thought ever thought by anybody, anywhere. You ready? To be or not to be, that is the question. Now, there's a bunch of monosyllabic words, a few of which are repeated. That's not big 25-cent vocabulary words, but think of the profundity of that idea. So the point is not have a big vocabulary. The point is take the time to choose actual words that you want to say to convey whatever you're thinking. And if you get good at that act of linguistic precision, what tends to happen is your verbal fluidity gets better because you build the muscles of tolerating thinking time in looking for that right word, as opposed to never building the muscle, because anytime there's silence, you just fill in the silence with some kind of first word that I can think of, like an or a kind of a sort of, just resort to something and never practice actually having a more skilled, more precise relationship to language. And I'm overdoing it a little bit now, as you can hear. But I think the two concepts are related. And I think that's a fun audience. If you want to go on this journey, what a fun journey to go on of trying to embrace both of these things.
So would you say it's similar to having verbal fluidity, a broader, color palette? There I go with my but a color palette to draw from. So for example, some might have just the primary colors, have access to only the primary colors, whereas others might have access to a broader array of shades.
Yeah, for sure. And people are different. So some people do have faster word recall than other people. Other people have built over a lifetime a larger vocabulary. And you can build your vocabulary more, but you may never catch up to, the folks who are reading from second grade volumes every single day. But the point is not, again, to have a huge vocabulary. The point would be do the work to be able to have discipline to choose the words that you want to share. And the fluidity, we do this naturally, by the way. People think we don't. So as an example, one of the biggest objections I get when coaching people is I'll say, that's not me, that's not natural. And 99% of the time, what they're saying is habitual. It's not natural, it is habitual. And I'm gently coaching them to have taller posture, use more breath, embrace more vocal variety, be more precise with their words, any of these things. And they say, that's not natural. And then they say, no, I'm just this way. But then I give them this thought. Okay, let's say you were talking to a group of fourth graders who don't speak your native language. Next thought experiment, you're talking to your friend's grandmother, who's a bit hard of hearing. Next thought experiment, you're talking to your bestie and you're hanging out and you're having a shared beverage. Would you speak the same way to all three audiences? No. And you would never think like, I'm a fraud, I'm being inauthentic, I'm not being natural. You would just shift because in that moment, what it's not me who matters. It's the people I'm trying to reach. And so therefore, I'm going to change my approach to do my best job to reach these various audiences. So that is an example of fluidity. You actually adjust how you speak based on who you're trying to reach.
And also like using big words doesn't even necessarily always convey intelligence. Sometimes it can have the opposite effect. I mean, I always think about what one of my favorite books is On Writing by Stephen King.
Yeah.
And I don't know how directly applicable it is to speech, but it's always worthwhile to try to distill what it is that you're writing into the most elementary, of words and phrases, and to try to whittle away the complexity.
Yeah, and the great writers of all time do this. First sentence of Moby Dick is, call me Ishmael. I just said to be or not to be. That is the question. So yes to everything you're saying. And this is a challenge I get a lot. I work in the startup community a lot. I coach founders who are oftentimes building these incredible moonshot efforts that are going to change humanity. And it's really complicated what they're doing. And it's all too easy to veer into 5 and 6 syllable words all the time and tremendously complex technical jargon. And a lot of times that doesn't carry the day. That's even for people who know what they're talking about. There's a whole bunch of other folks who don't, and they just mask that by trying to put a whole bunch of synergy and stakeholder and leverage and these sorts of words. And then you dig down through what they're saying, there's nothing there. It's like vapid, large words for no real purpose.
100%. Lots of verbiage, but little content.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the best way to enhance our verbal, which is the one that we're sticking with, fluidity? A lot of people will cite like, reading more books, for example, to expand the palette of words that you have access to.
Sure. I'll answer the question, and then I'm going to weave back in one other exercise about the ums and the you knows because it's related. And the reason I want to weave that back in is everybody listening, if I can give you one big idea from today, it is this: treat communication as the physical act that it is. Treat it like an athletic event and build different muscle memory. So the best thing by far to take from this book, and what people have really grabbed onto, and which has been driving some of its exposure and success, is there's exercises in every darn chapter about how to do a behavior better, whether it's walking your fingers or wearing a crown or throwing a wiffle ball or stacking Lego blocks, which is the one I'll get to in a second. But when you say, Is the best thing we can do read a lot and expand our vocabulary? It's a really powerful thing to do in your life. Yes, everybody read more. Yes, everybody build your vocabulary. But that's different from speaking. Our brain relates to the written word different than to the spoken word. And if you doubt this, write yourself a speech sometime and then stand up and then speak it. And then notice how clunky it sounds, because you're going to sound like you're reciting an email as opposed to actually speaking in a very immediate firsthand kind of way. So yes, build your vocabulary, but don't mistake that for the same thing of actually speaking and choosing language real time. So here's the exercise that can help with that. In Chapter 6 on conciseness, I have a page that people can rip out and tear up into 6 strips. Now, the exercise is best done with Lego blocks or Duplo blocks. That's much better than paper, but I can't jam Lego books or Lego blocks into the book. So it's just a page you can rip out. And the idea here is that you share some bit of content. It could be an introduction or an elevator pitch or a presentation, whatever it is. But you share it one idea at a time. Not 3 ideas or 10 ideas, 1. You pick up the piece of paper or the Lego block silently. With it in the air, you deliver your first thought. At the end of that thought, kind of like where the period might go at the end of the sentence, you put the Lego block down. Remain silent. Pick up the second one. Say the second idea. Again, you can think of this sort of like a second sentence. At the end of that sentence, in silence, you stack the block on the previous. Again, tolerate silence. Pick up the third. Say the third idea, and so on and so forth. So you're sharing one idea at a time, and you're giving yourself the discipline of actually evaluating at the end of that idea, do I need to keep going or not? Now, what this drill does is magically change the lives of people who have been over-talkers their entire life, who are verbose and ramble, because the feedback they get usually is like, that was really good, but just keep it a little more high level, okay? Like 30,000-foot view here, okay? Don't go on so long. None of that helps because it just makes them think more about themselves and the thing that they're terrible at. But this drill changes it, and changes it instantly, because it forces their body to do something different, which is pause. And all of a sudden, in that pause, their brain gets to do what their brain is dazzlingly good at, which is choose a word. But they can't do that if they're never interjecting pauses into what they're saying. So this tool can be very good for removing filler, like we talked about before. Also, extraneous phrases. It can also be very good for making your language more concise as well. And if you're giving yourself time to actually think about what you want to say, guess what you can do? Choose a better word from your, maybe it's even a limited vocabulary. Maybe you only have 7,000 words in your vocabulary. You still have the chance to choose the best one among those 7,000.
Wow. We all have friends that are prone to rambling. You know, we get that. We see their name, come up on our iPhones or whatever, calling us, and we're like, oh man, I don't have time for that 30-minute sermon that I'm about to get. I think it's funny, some of those, I don't know if you've seen those memes, but it's like, by the second or third time I say, that's crazy, you better be wrapping up that, that dialogue. It's such a problem, like that. I think it actually comes down to a lack of self-awareness more so than a problem with like communication. Some people just don't, so there's a lack of self-awareness that some people have with regards to communication. Is there a way to improve that?
Yeah. I kind of will dodge the I said kind of just now. The reason I said kind of is because I'm mixed on if I should dodge it or not. I think I will dodge the first part of the question. I agree with it, but I'm not the wisest voice ever saying, be mindful of how much you talk. Every great religious tradition ever, every great mindfulness practice, you have 2 ears and 1 mouth because you should listen twice as much as you speak and this sort of stuff. So yes to what you're saying, but let's jump to how can you change it. I would disagree a little bit with the self-awareness part. Yes, that's true for some people, but a lot of people, they know this. They know that when they get excited or nervous that they go on too long. They're actually painfully aware of this, but they lack the how to change it. And so all the ways they try to change it are actually counterproductive. They make it worse. And that becomes potentially almost drives you into a doom cycle or a doom loop where you just begin to feel even a level of self-loathing about this habit. So much, much better than that is do this exercise. Do the Lego stacking one I talked about. I'll give you another really effective one for it. This is called silent storytelling. And it is exactly like it sounds. You talk, but silently. So think of it like lip syncing, okay? Or even like if you were on a television and the television was muted, but you're still speaking, and the viewers can mostly understand what you're saying. They can pretty much read your lips. They can see on your face how animated you are, and they can see your hands moving because your hands have a story to tell too. So you speak, and I'll do this now for people who are watching the clips. Now, if you're just listening, what I was doing was mouthing words. Again, lip syncing a little bit. If you practice this silent storytelling activity, what you very quickly become aware of is which words am I choosing? Because I have to choose these words so emphatically and so deliberately that I can actually mouth the words, almost lip syncing them so that they could be lip read by somebody else, and move my hands and allow my face to be expressive too. And when I'm using that much physical commitment to express my words, guess what? I instantly become aware of what I'm saying and how long I'm speaking for. So it's a great way to kind of reverse engineer being briefer by bringing a hyper focus to what words are you actually choosing or not.
How much effort or attention do you place on the gesticulation with your hands and your facial expressions and even like the intonation of your voice?
Yeah.
Like how important are those variables?
Very, very important. But the really good news is that in this book, you're not going to read executive presence is speaking at 2.9 words per second with broad sweeping hand gestures on key points and holding eye contact for 8 to 12 seconds. Because if you do all that, you sound like a bad politician. All the things you just said, vocal variety, gesticulation, facial expressiveness, these are not arbitrary things that we shellac onto the outside of ourselves. They are the things that we do, the behaviors we manifest in order to reach the other person. We have gestures to try to get an idea across if our voice is not doing it. We use vocal variety. You said vocal variation. We use that for really crucial things like surprising our audience. If you hear me speak in a monotone the entire time, part of what your brain does is go to sleep because it hears a pattern. As soon as our brain establishes a pattern, it knows I don't have to pay attention to it because the pattern will never change, and therefore I can pay attention to the things in my life that are both dangerous and delightful because I can't predict them. You hear that? So vocal variety is not arbitrary. You need it. You need it to reach your audience. And when we are at our most other focused, really earnestly on fire about the subject we're speaking, and really earnestly trying to reach the audience we're speaking to, we do these things naturally. We have vocal variety. We gesticulate with our hands, usually more than we think, by the way. And our face moves to show what we're thinking and feeling. Humans are social animals. Facial expressions, I'm not an evolutionary biologist, okay, so you can fact check this one if you want to, but our facial expressions are thought to be an evolutionary development for community building. Because if I wander into your tribe and I see that your face looks friendly, I know, okay, maybe we can team up and go defeat the, marauding bears or whatever it is. If you look angry, I might give you some distance and back away. So they're not arbitrary. They come from us trying to reach the other person.
Yeah, they carry a lot of information, our facial expressions.
And our gestures. And the vocal variety, too. I mean, the example I give in the book, you're funny. You mentioned someone calling you and you send back a text message, sorry, can't talk right now. And in the chapter on vocal variety, I talk about if you've ever misinterpreted the intent of a text message. Your friend says, call me back. And they meant, call me back. And what you read was, call me back. All you've done is you've heard their voice with inaccurate vocal variety in your head. Because we use vocal variety to also communicate emotion to each other as well.
It's so true. Today, I mean, we live in a time where if nothing else, this, I think in many ways can be characterized as the rise of the podcast, the rise of authentic conversations. Like there were 3 pause words right there. I'm becoming more aware thanks to this conversation.
Well, and then the next pod, you can walk your fingers on certain key questions and you'll build some agility there.
But if you compare the way that we speak on this podcast and others to, for example, the way people speak on the nightly news, like the local news, they've adopted a artifice with how they communicate ideas. They don't even, I've talked about this on another episode recently, but they don't even talk like that. They've adopted this weird dialect. I don't know when that even began. You might know, but today people naturally, and I think rightfully, gravitate more to authentic conversations, people who are just talking. And so what would you say the difference is between, like, how has that evolution sort of played out?
There's a lot to unpack there. Please interrupt me mid-word on any of this, okay? Because we could go deep on this one question. So if I don't faithfully answer it, bring me back. Politicians get bad coaching. That's the first thing I will say. I happen to know that a politician, everybody listening would know, received coaching to make this one specific gesture over and over again, like so, repeatedly, because his gesture supposedly conveyed command. Okay, fine. But what if you do this gesture when you're talking about, I don't know, having a party this weekend or talking about what it means to see the Democratic or Republican electorate? What are you doing? So, of course, they get labeled with the kiss of death for a politician, which is inauthentic because they seem like they're on autopilot. So that's part of it. The other examples you're talking about, though, of newscasters, that's a bit different. Oftentimes they're reading off a teleprompter, so that's part of it. And you're not going to put, unless it's Ron Burgundy and you're sending up the art form, you're not going to put a bunch of ums and uhs into the teleprompter, of course. So that's a slightly different situation. And the other fun place to watch for this is in movie dialogue. You'll see very heightened scenes and people don't say in the whole scene because the screenwriter didn't put a bunch of ums in there. So much so that when you look at some actors who've developed that as a bit of a brand, Bob Newhart back in the day, Jeff Goldblum is another one. If you're more of a stage fan, Mark Rylance does this a fair bit when he's on stage, where they inject a bunch of ums and uhs into their some stammers and some non-fluencies to convey.
They do it purposefully.
Yeah, I think they do. And if you want to get into an acting critique of it, you could, which is they may have developed a bit of a shtick with that. And in order for them to feel authentic, they have to do that. But the challenge is, if you're an actor, your job is to feel authentic in a whole bunch of different roles. I mean, roles as wide as the human experience itself. So I would argue that those actors, in fact, should see what happens if they forego some of that clutter and see what it feels like to play an incredibly precise character as well. Anyway, back to your question, though. So there's a world of that being true in drama and in movies and TV as well. And then with politicians, it really can be the kiss of death. The final point on this, though, is that I would invite you and the audience to tweak our idea of authentic, though. And here's why. It is a real trap to think, I'm just going to show up for that interview or that podcast or that date or that whatever. I'm just going to be myself and just be authentic. And if anyone wants to critique it, they're just like, they're picking on me. This is who I am. And anything is like an unfair ad hominem attack on me. No, that's not true. You at your most authentic is not you. It's not you like some royal version of you. We are creatures. The superpower, our superpower, is to reach each other, to communicate. It's what allowed us to outcompete other hominids and build the darn society we live in the first place. So that changeable nature that humans have to change what they're doing, to reach the other person, that's what's actually authentic. So shockingly, if you want to embrace this, people, you might have a much bigger, authentic self than you actually realize. So be careful that you don't actually kind of screw with your own mind and limit who you are by some slightly arbitrary, slightly enforced, and slightly habitual idea of who you are authentically. And I bet you some of the podcasts that you listen to that you think are the most interesting, the most powerful, amazing conversations, I bet you they're more precise than you might think. And even though they're precise, even though they feature two people who are really choosing their words, they seem very authentic. Because the authenticity is not derived from personality or identity. The authenticity is derived from their intense focus and need about the subject matter, and their intense focus to have the other person understand what they feel about the subject matter, which is where, debates or even arguments or fights come from.
Yeah.
Long answer, I know. And now I will stop talking, okay?
No.
You talk a little bit.
Well, but I love what you said about the folly of thinking that, your most authentic self can't be catered to the specific context in which you are asked to show up.
Yes.
Like, for example, I'm dressed right now as my most authentic self, but when I had to go to the recent, I attended inauguration in DC and I went to some of the balls, I showed up as my most authentic self in a tuxedo, which isn't normally how I dress.
Yeah.
But I got to embody that for a little while, and I wasn't any less authentic. I just had to wear the costume for the occasion.
Yeah.
And humans, as social animals, that's part of how we communicate with one another.
Yeah.
Is by dressing the part, whatever that part happens to be.
That's right. And if you want to blow your mind a little bit about this, what a richer, fuller life one could have if one really thought, my most authentic self is when I am of service to other people. Not me, like, this is who I am, these are my values, this is how I think about everything. No, my mission in life is to be of service to other people. And the way we serve other people as communicators is that we gently and fluidly and gracefully adjust what we're doing all the time, based on the person who doesn't speak our native language, or is slightly hard of hearing, or has a worse vocabulary, or has a better vocabulary, or really is moved by stories and metaphors versus numbers. We do this all the time, all the time. And what if we embraced, as opposed to my identity and who I am and what's authentic to me, what if we embraced, no, my job is to be in communion, in connection, in communication with all the other countless people around me. And the better job I do serving them as a communicator, the more authentic I am.
Amen. Do you have any tips on improving the quality of our voices, how our voices are perceived?
For sure. Yeah. I did not invent the subject I'm about to say, vocal variety. Speaking of how humans have evolved, we have used vocal variety as long as we've been human, and we use it for really important reasons. A couple I've already teed up. One is to convey emotion. Another is to surprise our audience, change our voices so you don't know what's coming next. So you have to keep listening like a verbal cliffhanger, okay? We surprise each other. We convey meaning via vocal variety, and we orient our audience. So these are really profound purposes for which we use vocal variety. What I'm leading to is I did build a naming system or a rubric for vocal variety to help people remember this and treat it with more sophistication than it normally gets treated. And in fact, the chapter in the book on vocal variety is the longest in the book because it's such an important subject. So the naming system is pace, pitch, pause, power, placement. And you can even tick that off on 5 fingers if it helps you remember it. Pace is speed, that's fast and slow. Pitch is high and low. Pause is just silence, longer, shorter. And power is another word for volume. So I'll back up from the mic a little bit, which is loud and soft. And then placement means where the sound is placed in your body. So as an example, if you put your hand on your throat and you say a fun phrase, my voice is my body, you feel your hand kind of vibrates because there's vibration happening. If you plug your nose, you say, my voice is my body, your voice sounds different because you've changed how the voice is placed or how it amplifies in the body. So these 5 Ps are the musical dynamics that determine the inflection of our voices. And we use it for really important reasons. You can make that better. And the way you can make it better is by connecting more to your breath, by breathing more, by speaking on the breath, and by treating your body like the communication instrument that it is, and weaving in a physical and vocal warm-up into your every single day.
What might that look like? I mean, I've taken, I enjoy singing, and I've taken the odd vocal lesson, like singing lessons.
Sure.
So in voice and singing, you sound like a singer. Are you a singer?
You sound like a singer too, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The vocal trill.
Yeah.
Is a very useful, allegedly warm up.
Yeah, for sure. This one I am going to punt a little bit, which is if people want to buy the book, I'll tell you which chapter to read. If you don't feel like buying a book, that's fine. You can also go to my company's website because it's free. There's no firewall. And we have a bunch of these video resources there for people because I can explain them now a little bit, but it's a whole lot. I mean, think of learning how to do a great squat in the gym or a certain kind of lift. It's not so useful to hear it described. You should watch the video and see. So that's simple. My company is GK Training. It's just gktraining.com, and we have a YouTube channel with all these exercises. If you want to buy the book, there's a chapter on warming up, and it features a whole bunch of things like lip trills, like you're talking about, but that release the breath, open up the enunciators, get your mouth dexterous and alive. Because the thing that people don't understand about communication that they should is that it is a physical activity. We think it's all thinking. Like, I'm going to have brilliant thoughts and I'm going to open my mouth, I'm going to say brilliant thoughts and I'm going to carry the day, or get the person to go out with me or win the job or whatever it is. And then when that doesn't happen, we think like, oh God, I should have said that thing. I had that great idea and then I didn't say it. This completely misses a point that we are a musical instrument. We have a reed in our throat, just like an oboe or a clarinet. And then we allow air to flow past that. It picks up vibration, and then that vibration gets altered and amplified based on enunciation. And when you work on your singing, that's what you're doing. You are being a musical instrument. But speaking is music too. It's just not sustained in the same way as when we sing, but it's still music. So if you want to get better at how your voice sounds, you have to train it. And a big part of that is warming up.
Yeah, it drives me crazy when I feel vocal fatigue. Like at the inauguration, just because it's top of mind, most recently at these events, there's a lot of schmoozing and the environment can be loud. And there's nothing I hate more than than the sense of straining my voice.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is because my voice has a lower register. It's a deeper voice, obviously. I feel like I have to use more energy for it to carry in loud environments. It's not like some people have like natural tweeters in their voice where it's like just higher. It just carries more easily. Mine, I have to project. And so sometimes that leads to vocal fatigue for me. Yeah.
This is not accidental. You were talking about the hardest place to take care of your voice. Only place harder would be at a rock concert or a dance club in which you're shouting into someone's ear to try to be heard. But in those situations, what happens is we just give up talking. We just dance or enjoy ourselves. So your voice isn't fatigued because you're not using it. But that situation, a loud event, everyone's trying to socialize, that is the worst because you have a huge amount of background noise. And you're not actually thinking about supporting your voice the way you would if you were singing from a stage. You're just trying to sort of shout words into each other's ears. And so you're setting yourself up for failure for sure. I mean, it's a big topic to go into in this forum, but basically what you should do is warm up before you get there. And for you specifically, you should not try to achieve louder volume. You should try to use more enunciation and use those other 5 Ps for your voice to be understood. Because you're right, if you're trying to talk louder and louder in one register as I'm doing right now, what happens is not only is it difficult to do, but over time, this one register gets really tired and really worn out. So instead, use all of those 5 Ps and really focus on enunciation. Because enunciation has that determines a lot of if people actually understand what we're saying or not.
Yeah, and one thing that I've learned by way of like the learning how to be a better singer is you've got to actually most people don't appreciate the degree to which your face needs to actually move to assist proper enunciation.
Yes.
Like if you ever watch people singing like in live performance, not music videos because those are always fake. Those are faked. But when you watch somebody singing live, their faces move in a way to help them get the vowels out of their, like literally out of their face.
Yeah. People, I don't have the URL for this, but you should totally Google or use whatever search engine you want to. Search for, you can say singer X-rayed or something like this, X-ray of a singer. And there's this amazing side view of someone singing. I think he's singing Tannhauser, a German opera. I think that's the right thing, but I could be mangling the reference. I don't know. Anyway, it's this amazing X-ray of the person singing, and you see exactly what you're talking about. You see this tremendous muscular coordination that has to happen to sing. This sounds like you and I are getting a little bit into the weeds. We're not. This is the point of this conversation. And particularly in the issues that you're interested in life, this is the most powerful aha moment that people can have, is that this is a sport. Speaking is a physical discipline. It's a physical activity we do. We do this miraculous interaction with the universe where we take air, neutral air, we turn it into sound and we shape it into words and we magically achieve stuff. But it's a physical activity. So if you're an athlete out there, if you like the stuff that you listen to on your podcast about athletics and fitness and training and wellness and all the stuff that you're into, speaking is that same thing, and you should treat it like an athlete.
Amen. It's funny because you assume that singers are just making all kinds of funny faces to look cool. Mm-hmm. And I in particular, I love like rock music. So like watching a rock singer sing and to get those vowels out, you know, their faces contort in all kinds of weird ways, and it definitely looks cool.
Yeah.
But it's actually quite purposeful. They're doing it to get these vowels out. You know, everybody's mouths are shaped differently, and yeah, it could be really helpful to try some of these exercises, even if you're not a singer that singers use.
Yeah, for sure. And by the way, it's not just, so here's an example. I'm a professional communicator. I like to think I'm decent at turning air into sound and sound into words. I've been at this a long time. One might think, okay, you've been doing this a while. You could just pause. I don't. I warm up every darn day. A little bit, not hours, but 5-10 minutes every single day. Not because I get nervous as a speaker, but because I know I'll have a little bit better chance of saying something smart and saying it in such a way from a delivery standpoint that it actually lands on people. And so I warm up every single day. You could treat it as part of your athletic regimen or, training regimen.
I'm definitely going to check out your videos on the topic. I mean, I do lip trills just to warm up as well, but any added tools to have in the toolkit, certainly valuable.
Yeah.
Is there any one thing that people believe about speaking that's completely wrong?
Mm-hmm. 1,000. Sorry. How long do we have? Let's talk about all the stuff they're wrong about. I wouldn't say it's just one. I'll put your attention on two things. The one we've already hammered already, that we think it's a mental activity or an activity of cognition thinking, but it totally misses how physical it is. It takes 120 muscles, more than that actually, to speak. But we've already hit that pretty hard. The other thing is a pathway. And there's really 3 errors here. And it's the pathway people normally go about trying to get better. And it has 3 terrible missteps. The first is thought suppression. The second is some sort of general suggestion that sounds like good advice, but is so general to be completely unactionable. And the third thing is a mental reminder for what is actually a physical activity, speaking. So let's take someone who talks too quick, all right? They talk way too fast all the time. What do they hear when people give them advice or coaching? First, don't talk too fast. Well, that's thought suppression. That's don't think about a pink elephant. Your brain can't do it. So all it's doing is fixating on the subject matter of talking too fast and the culprit who talks too fast, you. So it doesn't work. Second thing, after that thought suppression, is you get a general piece of advice that is so vague as to be completely inactionable. Like, just slow down. Okay, when? Between words? On all the words? In the midst of words? To extend them? And if just slow down was going to work, it would have worked 30 years ago, the first time you heard it, or 5, or whenever it was. And then the third thing is you get a mental reminder for what is a physical activity. And so that sounds like, remember to breathe. If you're stressed out when presenting, if you're nervous, why on earth would you think one more mental thing to have to remember would change your physical habit whatsoever? It's like telling an athlete or a golfer or something, remember to keep your elbow tucked in, and saying that on a Wednesday, and then thinking it would change their game on a Saturday. It wouldn't. So people tend to screw themselves up terribly with these three basic layers of communication, advice, or attempts to change. And how to do it better, all of the physical stuff I talked about in the book, these various exercises, the Legos, the finger walking, that kind of stuff.
So advice often is just presented in a way that's not necessarily helpful, or how it's received is not always helpful, or what's the antidote then?
Yeah. The advice is not just presented badly, it is counterproductive. So if you talk too fast out there, and you've heard people say to you, don't talk too fast, just slow down, remember to breathe, it is very likely that not only have you never been able to implement any of those suggestions, but it's also very likely you feel bad about yourself afterwards. Because you think, God, I got this great advice, and this person tried to help me out, and I know that about myself. I talked too fast. Shoot, and I still wasn't able to do it. I failed again. I messed up again. And you go into this terrible self-defeating self-critique. But it was never going to work. It's terrible advice. We don't give that advice to athletes ever. We break things down very specifically. So what? Oh, go ahead.
Well, but can you also say like the customer is always right? I mean, if this person has been getting that advice their whole life, maybe they do talk too fast.
I'm not saying the observation isn't right. You're right. The observation is absolutely right. They do talk too fast. Maybe they talk 6 words per second or something insane. Yeah. But is the best way to change that to say, don't talk too fast, just slow down, remember to breathe? No. In fact, it might even make it worse. They might talk faster after all that. So yes, I agree with the observation, but how to change it? You have to create a different physical pattern, because speaking is physical. So instead, the finger walking activity I showed you before is a brilliant one to adjust rate of speech. You can also do it on a balance beam. You can also do an exercise from the book, which is the only one I did not invent. The book has all these kinesthetic tools that I've built working with clients. This one comes actually from an incredible historical pedigree. It goes all the way back to ancient Greece and an orator named Demosthenes. And I learned about it from the head of voice and speech at the Royal Shakespeare Company in London, a guy named Andrew Wade. I'm giving this whole background simply to pedigree it because it's silly. And if you do it, you're going to feel ridiculous. But you should do it because it has this, incredible legacy of working. And all it is you speak with an impediment in between your teeth. So the easiest one to use is your pinky finger. And you bite on your pinky finger. If you're just listening, you can hear the slightly altered sound of my enunciation now. But you can also use a slice of wine cork, a starburst, or a piece of candy, an end of a pen. The only rule is, folks, don't inhale it and choke on the impediment, okay? But just like a runner, a sprinter training with a parachute on their back behind them, all this is doing is creating an impediment that you have to fight past. But for those fast talkers out there, it makes the act of speaking much more difficult. And you actually have to slow down that utterly inactionable piece of feedback, but you actually do it physically. So that's an exercise that we teach in the chapter on, that's one on enunciation. That's a chapter on that one.
Wow, so useful. Don't say well, people should definitely check out the book. I mean, communication is so important. If at this point, I mean, I know we just met, but is there anything that you would critique about the way that I communicate?
Are you sure you want this?
Yeah.
Everyone I meet always says, don't critique my communication. Turn it off. I don't want to hear it. Can we just talk?
Roast me.
I'm not going to roast you. I'm going to give you an interesting concept to think about. So you've said to me multiple times, I don't like the filler. I don't like the ums. I'm trying to change that a little bit. In the chapter on eye contact, I invite you to do an exercise in which you scatter dots around the room, okay? And then you try to speak something intelligible, but the task you're giving yourself is to move your eyes as fast as you possibly can at all the dots, as quick as you possibly can. So shifting your eyes, 3, 4, 7 times each second to these different dots. and then also try to say something intelligible while you're doing that. And what you discover in the book is it's really hard to do that because your eyes are glancing around like you're a scared, rabbit or something trying to come and attack you. It makes speaking really difficult. So a different way to reverse engineer greater precision with your word choice would be to play around, not because you need better eye contact. You don't. Reverse engineer greater precision with language by focusing on when you look away, and if you're looking away because you actually need to find a word, or if you need to find the word because you looked away. And then the and the filler comes in the act of looking for the word, but it may in fact be that you could begin to decouple that habit. And by being more focused on your target, it's like an athlete who's a marksman of some kind, or any kind of sport that features throwing tools, balls or javelins or whatever. Being more focused on your target might actually make your language more precise too. So it would be a different way to actually examine filler and precision with language.
Could I be more precise with my language? Is that the criticism?
Here's the thing. I really enjoy talking to you. And I'm not saying that as lip service, okay? I really do. I'm going off what you've told me. Because if we play back this, you've asked me probably 5 questions about filler and unintentional language. We talked about we talked about we talked about people adding in phrases, even the one that, I can't remember the one you mentioned, but there's something you were saying at the ends of sentences or the beginning of sentences. You've asked that same question in a whole myriad of ways in this conversation. They all boil down to the same thing, you being in charge of the words that are coming out of your mouth. And my point to you is it may be a more nuanced and sophisticated physical pattern than you might think. But it's not a critique from me. I think you're a quite good communicator. I really do. I'll talk about that in a second, what is good or is not good, okay? But it's what you've said to me. Those are the things that you think you could improve. And so that's why I'm giving you the kind of exercise about making your eye contact more linear for the purpose of exploring being more linear and more precise with your language. But now, before I go on too long, but I got to jam this in here, when I say you're a good communicator, I actually don't mean that at all. I think that's a silly way to describe something, as though you are an American, you are a Californian. I don't know if you are or not, but we're in California right now.
New Yorker, but I'll take it.
Yeah, okay, you are a New Yorker, some sort of fixed state. You are not a good communicator. You are capable of good communication, as we all are. And sometimes we communicate worse, and sometimes we communicate better. And even the trap of thinking of ourselves as good or bad communicators, good or bad salespeople, good or bad negotiators, it's a trap. That's a fixed mindset trap. And we are better or worse depending on how other focused we are.
Being more precise with my language. I mean, that's something that I can be insecure about. It's so important to me. Like because I do a lot of media, I'll go on TV. If I use a word or I don't, my grammar is not great, I'm actually okay with the filler words. Like hearing myself say and that. But if I use a word improperly, or if there's a better word that's well within my lexicon, but it didn't come to me in that moment, that drives me nuts. So.
Yeah. The exercises in the book will help with this a lot. You should do silent storytelling. Again, that's the one where you're mouthing words essentially. You should do the finger walking activity. You should also do the stacking Lego block activity. And you should also do the eye contact one for being more linear with your gaze and probably more linear with your word choice too. Not that you need any of this stuff. I said I think you're quite skilled at communicating today anyway while we're having this conversation. But all of those do the same thing. They are all physical ways to force you to commit more to the words that you're choosing. And even the thing you just said about, God, I know I have a better word somewhere in my vocabulary, I can't find it. Even that, if you set yourself up for success by using your body, just like an athlete, in a better way, you're going to have a better chance to find that word. So think of a basketball player. The likelihood that their shot is going to go in has everything to do with them building the fundamentals, that their release is the same every single time, their think of Steph Curry. Every single thing he does is polished to this ritualistic precision. He still only makes, 40%, 50% of shots in a given night. But he knows that he's setting himself up to get that 40% or 50% because of those fundamentals. If he didn't have those, it'd be 30%, 20%. And then he's not in the NBA because he's undersized historically for a basketball player. If you set yourself up for success by how you breathe, by how, as a trained singer now, how you use your enunciation, how you allow breath to enter and exit your body, how you use your gaze, how you use your hands, all these things, what you're doing is setting your body up to communicate optimally. You're helping your body achieve some degree of flow state. And then what happens? Your brain is better at finding that word it's looking for, and it found it. And now you found that word, which guess what? Makes the next word easier too, because they follow along a little bit. And then soon all of a sudden you feel like, wow, I was really on that day. I really finding my words. And the liberation of this book is it's not quicksilver. I had it that one day, now it's gone. And then I had it. No, this is just like an athlete training to get better hour by hour, day by day. And if you do these exercises, you get better.
Yeah. You get more, you get, and it becomes, what is the term? It becomes, there's like the trajectory of expertise when something becomes
unconsciously unskilled.
Something like that.
Yeah. I mean, you can think of the 4 stages.
Or unconsciously skilled, right?
Yes, thank you. You're right. Unconsciously unskilled is the first one.
Yeah.
That's the first stage. I don't know what I'm bad at. But then you're right. The final destination is unconsciously skilled. Yeah. Don't even have to be intentional about it anymore. It just happens.
Yeah. Just it becomes rote.
Yes.
Dude, well, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your wisdom with us. This was super fun. And I'm incredibly passionate about voice and vocal performance and all this stuff. So this was a treat. Where can people find you on social media? Where can they pick up your exciting new book, Don't Say
Yeah, sure. So for the book, the URL is painfully simple, don'tsayum.com. And by the way, if you want to, you can go there and also get the chapter on navigating nerves for free, because I feel like I have a tiny mission in life, to the extent that I can achieve it, to try to help people who are really suffering with nerves and stage fright to have a better approach. So that chapter is totally free if you want it. don'tsayum.com. The company website, the company that I'm the founder of and still lead, is GK Training. That's just gktraining.com. GK Training, like the word training.com. And then for me personally, LinkedIn is the simplest place. Michael Chad Hoeppner, LinkedIn.
Dope. Well, Michael, thanks for coming in. The last question that gets asked everybody on the show: what does living a genius life mean to you?
Living a genius life to me means being of service to other people. And I think the reason that is because it's not all about your genius. It's about trying to unlock others' genius. And I think communication is one small way to do that, because by definition, if we're communicating well, what we're doing is being of service to the other person.
It's massive. It's so important. Today more than ever, honestly. Well, thanks again for coming out. This was super fun.
My pleasure. I had a great time.
Of course. Likewise. Thank you guys for listening. Share this episode around with friends, loved ones that may benefit from it, and I will catch you on the next episode. Peace. Hey, if you liked that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.